They don't need an army. They don't need tanks or stealth bombers. Because with a single keystroke from a windowless basement at the Federal Reserve, the entire global economy can be brought to its knees. You think you're living in the land of the free. Think again. You are trapped in a financial labyrinth, a world where the true masters, the deep state, operate not through your ballot box, but through predatory loans, interest rates, and classified memos between the IMF and the World Bank. Any nation that dares to speak up is choked by debt, bled dry by inflation, and strangled by aid agreements written in the blood of the middle class. The question is there a way out? Or are we all just players in a rigged game where the winner was decided before you were even born? Welcome to the Invisible Driver, where there are truths that society doesn't want you to know. Imagine you're walking down the aisle of a massive American supermarket. You see rows upon rows of options. 10 different brands of toothpaste, 20 types of cereal. Two giants, Coke and Pepsi, are battling for your thirst. You feel powerful. You feel free. But that feeling, it's a carefully manufactured hallucination. If you peel back the colorful labels and follow the money up the mountain, the illusion of competition vanishes. You'll find that the same three shadows own almost everything you touch, eat, and watch. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. These are not just investment firms. They are the ultimate landlords of the planet. They don't just own the companies, they own the rivals too. They are the largest shareholders in Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. They own the lion's share of Exxon and Chevron. They own the networks that tell you the news and the tech giants that censor it. And at the heart of this empire sits a digital god named Aladdin. This is BlackRock's proprietary AI. It doesn't just track markets. It manages over $21 trillion in assets. That is more than the entire GDP of the United States. Aladdin calculates every risk, predicts every crash, and directs the flow of global capital with a cold, mathematical precision that no human government can match. The lesson here is simple, yet terrifying. In a world where the same hand holds both sides of the coin, the game is rigged before you even place your bet. Real competition is dead. It has been replaced by a monopoly of capital that knows no borders and answers to no voters. But how did we get here? How did a group of private individuals gain the power to own the world's production while staying completely invisible to the average citizen? To find the answer, we have to look past the modern skyscrapers and go back to a time of shadows and cigar smoke. We have to look at the man who taught the elite how to turn a national disaster into a private gold mine. The history books tell you that in 1907, a hero saved America. They tell you that when the stock market crashed and banks were failing, one man, J.P. Morgan, stepped out of the shadows, put his own money on the line, and rescued the nation from total collapse. It's a beautiful story. It's also a lie. In reality, the Panic of 1907 wasn't a natural disaster. It was a stage-managed, controlled burn. Think about it. Before you can force a free people to accept a central bank, you first have to make them terrified of a world without one. Morgan and his associates didn't just solve the crisis. They helped ignite it by fueling rumors that the Knickerbocker Trust, a major competitor, was insolvent. Once the panic started, Morgan played the part of the savior. He famously locked the city's top bankers in his private library at 225 Madison Avenue, refusing to let them leave until they agreed to his terms. He didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. He did it to prove a point to the American public, that the financial system was too unstable to be left to the free market. He planted a seed of fear in the minds of every American family that lost their life savings in that crash. That seed was a single, devastating idea. We need a central authority to protect us. The lesson here is a classic tactic used by the deep state for centuries. The Hegelian dialectic. Create the problem, wait for the public reaction, then offer the pre-planned solution. By 1910, the solution was ready. But the men behind it knew that if the American people saw their faces, the plan would be dead on arrival. They needed absolute secrecy. They needed a location so remote, so isolated, that not even the ghost of Thomas Jefferson could hear them plotting. They were about to board a private train, under assumed names, heading toward a secluded island off the coast of Georgia, a place where the American Republic would be signed away for a price. In November 1910, a private railroad car with curtains drawn tight sat at a station in Hoboken, New Jersey. A group of men arrived one by one, using only first names: Nelson, Frank, Paul, to avoid being recognized by the press or the public. These weren't just any men. They represented 1/4 of the entire world's wealth. Their destination: a secluded duck hunting lodge on Jekyll Island, Georgia. For 9 days, behind locked doors and under heavy guard, these titans of Wall Street, the very people J.P. Morgan had supposedly saved the country from, wrote the blueprint for the Federal Reserve. Think about the sheer audacity of it. The banking laws that govern your life today weren't drafted by elected officials in Washington, D.C. They were written in secret by the very bankers they were supposed to regulate. And then came the masterstroke, the name. They didn't call it the Central Bank of Wall Street. They called it the Federal Reserve. They knew the American people, with their deep-rooted love for liberty, would never accept a private monopoly. So they chose a name that sounded safe, official, and government-controlled. But here is the hard truth. The Federal Reserve is about as federal as Federal Express. It is a private corporation owned by its member banks. It has no reserves. It creates money out of thin air. The lesson? If you want to control a population, you don't just control their money, you control the language. By labeling a private heist as a public service, they gain the power to print wealth without ever having to face an election. When President Woodrow Wilson signed this act into law on December 23, 1913, while most of Congress was already home for Christmas, the trap was officially set. But printing the money was only the beginning. To truly turn a nation into a workforce of debtors, they needed a way to make sure that every dollar created was born with a burden. They needed a debt engine, and that engine was about to change the very physics of how you earn a living. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you work or how many raises you get, the American dream keeps drifting further out of reach? You're running faster, but the finish line is moving even faster. That's not an accident. It's the result of the debt engine. You see, when the Federal Reserve creates money, they don't just print it. They create it by buying government debt. This means every single dollar in your wallet was born as a loan that must be paid back with interest. But here's the kicker. The Fed creates the principal, but they never create the interest. Mathematically, the debt will always be higher than the total amount of money in existence. We are living in a game of musical chairs where the music never stops, but there are never enough chairs for everyone. But it gets worse. It's called the Cantillon effect. Named after an 18th century banker, this principle explains how the elite stay wealthy while you stay broke. When the Fed prints trillions of dollars, like they did in 2008 or 2020, that new money doesn't hit your bank account first. It hits the big banks and the massive corporations first. They get to spend that fresh cash while prices are still low. By the time that money finally trickles down to your paycheck, it's already too late. The massive influx of cash has already driven up the price of eggs, gas, and housing. You are the last one to receive the money, but the first one to pay the higher prices. The lesson? Inflation isn't a glitch in the system. It is a hidden, silent tax. It is the sophisticated way the deep state steals the hours of your life without you ever seeing a thief in your house. They are siphoning your labor to fund their global ambitions, and their most expensive ambition of all. It's not healthcare, and it's not education. It's the most profitable business in human history. To understand why your taxes are never enough, we have to follow the money into the smoke of the battlefield, where every bullet fired is a dividend for the bankers. They tell us we go to war for freedom, for democracy, for human rights. But if you look at the balance sheets, you'll find that war is actually the ultimate audit of the global financial system. It is a massive, violent reset button that destroys old infrastructure so that new debt can be issued to rebuild it. To the deep state, a soldier is a line item, and a missile is a high-yield investment. Look back at World War I. While American families were told to stay neutral, the banking house of J.P. Morgan was already acting as the sole purchasing agent for the British and French, funneling billions into the machinery of death. They weren't just betting on a winner, they were financing the game itself. And in World War II, the betrayal went even deeper. While American boys were dying on the beaches of Normandy, American corporations like ITT, Ford, and Standard Oil were being accused of keeping the Nazi war machine running through international credit loops and supply chains. To the elite, a flag is just a piece of fabric. The only thing that truly matters is who holds the debt when the smoke clears. Even after the victory, the exploitation didn't stop. Through Project Paperclip, the deep state quietly absorbed thousands of Nazi scientists and intelligence officers into the American heartland, not because they cared about their souls, but because they needed their expertise in mind control, aerospace, and chemical warfare. They weren't defeating an ideology, they were harvesting it. The lesson is brutal. War is not about winning territory. It is about generating interest. Peace is a liability to a bank that thrives on destruction. Every explosion on your TV screen is a dividend for someone sitting in a skyscraper in New York or London. By 1945, the world was a graveyard, and the bankers were the only ones left with a full wallet. They had the world exactly where they wanted it. Broken, bleeding, and begging for a loan. But to keep this global empire from collapsing, they needed a new set of rules. They needed a way to make sure that no matter where you lived, your life's work was tied to a piece of paper they controlled. They were about to turn the entire planet into a golden cage known as the Bretton Woods system. August 15th, 1971. A Sunday night. Most Americans were sitting in their living rooms, unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to vanish. President Richard Nixon appeared on television and announced he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the US dollar into gold. That temporary measure has now lasted over 50 years. In that single moment, the elite pulled off the greatest heist in human history. They decoupled your money from reality. Before 1971, a dollar was a receipt for a piece of gold. It had a limit. But after the Nixon shock, the dollar became a fiat currency, money backed by nothing but faith and credit. Or more accurately, money backed by the threat of the most powerful military on Earth. But there was a problem. If the dollar wasn't backed by gold, why would the rest of the world keep using it? The deep state had a plan. They sent Henry Kissinger to the deserts of Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple. We will protect your kingdom with our weapons, and in exchange, you must price every single barrel of your oil in US dollars. Only dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Suddenly, every nation on the planet, Germany, Japan, China, didn't just want dollars. They needed them to keep their lights on. This forced the entire world to subsidize the American lifestyle and fund our endless wars. Because if the world needs dollars, the Fed can print trillions of them without the US economy collapsing. Yet, the lesson? When money is no longer tied to anything real, the people who print the money become the masters of reality. They can create wealth for their friends and inflation for their enemies. But this wasn't just about controlling America. It was about creating a global net that no nation could escape. Because once the world was addicted to the dollar, the deep state brought in their sledgehammers, the IMF and the World Bank. They weren't coming to build bridges. They were coming to build cages. And their favorite tool was the predatory loan. If you wanted to conquer a nation 100 years ago, you needed 1 million soldiers and 1,000 tanks. Today, you just need a pen, a suit, and a loan agreement. The IMF and the World Bank. They sound like humanitarian organizations, don't they? They show you pictures of clean water and new schools in distant lands. But in the world of the deep state, these are the primary tools of modern-day colonialism. It starts with an economic hitman. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a confession. John Perkins, a former high-level consultant, famously revealed the blueprint. Step 1. Identify a nation with resources the deep state wants: oil, minerals, or a strategic location. Step 2. Offer them a massive loan for infrastructure that they can never realistically repay. Step 3. Ensure that money is paid directly to massive US corporations like Bechtel or Halliburton to do the work. The money never even leaves the United States. It just moves from one vault to another, while the target nation is left holding the bill. And then comes the trap. When the nation inevitably defaults, the IMF steps in with conditionalities. They don't want the money back. They want the country's soul. They demand austerity, forcing the government to cut healthcare, slash education, and privatize their water, electricity, and land for pennies on the dollar. They turn sovereign nations into corporate subsidiaries. The lesson? Debt is the most effective weapon ever invented. A man in debt is a slave. A nation in debt is a colony. From the jungles of South America to the plains of Africa, this machine has been grinding human lives into interest payments for decades. But don't think for a second that this debt trap is only for the developing world. The machine is coming home. The same elite who used debt to conquer foreign nations are now using a much more invisible web to conquer you. They've realized they don't just need to control where you live or what you owe. They need to control how you think. And to do that, they've turned your smartphone into the ultimate surveillance tool.
You've probably noticed it. You mention a product in a private conversation,
and 10 minutes later, there's an ad for it on your feed. You think it's just good marketing. It's not. It's the Digital Panopticon. In the 18th century, a philosopher designed a prison called the Panopticon, a circular building where a single guard could watch every prisoner, but the prisoners could never see the guard. Eventually, the prisoners stopped breaking rules because they felt watched at all times. They began to police themselves. Today, that prison is in your pocket. The deep state realized that controlling your money wasn't enough if they couldn't control your mind. Silicon Valley didn't just happen by accident. Google's early funding can be traced back to the CIA's venture capital arm, In-Q-Tel. Facebook began just as the Pentagon's LifeLog project, a massive surveillance database, was being shut down. These platforms aren't free. You are the product. Every like, every search, and every GPS coordinate is a data point fed into the same algorithms used by the deep state to model human behavior. They don't need to ban your thoughts. They just need to tilt the algorithm so you never see them. They use shadow banning, fact-checking, and cancel culture to create a digital perimeter. If you step outside the narrative, you are silenced, not by a secret police at your door, but by a line of code that deletes your reach. The lesson? Privacy is not about having something to hide. Privacy is about the power to be an individual. When they know everything about you, they can predict you. And when they can predict you, they can control you. This digital surveillance is the final layer of the golden cage. They've tracked your debt, they've tracked your location, and they've mapped your mind. But there is one final wall they need to build to make the prison escape-proof. They need to merge your digital identity with your ability to survive. They are moving to take the last thing you have that represents physical freedom, the cash in your wallet. The next step isn't just an upgrade to your bank app. It's the ultimate on/off switch for your life. We are now approaching the finish line of a century-long marathon. The elite have controlled the banks, the wars, and the data. Now, they are coming for the very nature of your sovereignty. They call it CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. Do not be fooled. This is not digital cash, and it is absolutely not Bitcoin. Bitcoin was designed to be decentralized and permissionless. CBDC is the exact opposite. It is programmable social control disguised as convenience. Think about the physical cash in your wallet right now. When you spend a $20 bill, the government doesn't know what you bought, where you bought it, or why. That is a fragment of true freedom. But in a world of CBDCs, every transaction is a permission slip. Because CBDC is programmable, the Fed can decide what you are allowed to buy. Did you buy too much meat this month? Your transaction is declined to save the planet. Did you post something misinformative on social media? Your wallet is frozen for 48 hours. Are you trying to save money? They can give your digital dollars an expiration date to force you to spend and stimulate the economy. This isn't a conspiracy theory. We've already seen the prototype. In 2022, the Canadian government froze the bank accounts of peaceful protesters without a single court order. They turned off their ability to buy food or fuel with a click of a mouse. That was the trial run. CBDC is the permanent infrastructure for that level of tyranny. The lesson? When the government controls the on/off switch to your ability to survive, you no longer live in a republic. You live in a digital plantation. This is the end game. The golden cage is being wired with high-voltage sensors. The deep state is betting that you will trade your last shred of privacy for the ease of a government app. They think you are too tired, too distracted, and too afraid to resist. But they forgot one thing. A cage only works as long as the prisoner believes there is no way out. The walls are closing in, yes, but for the first time in history, the cracks in their system are becoming visible to millions. The question isn't whether they will try to lock the door. The question is, do you have the courage to step outside before it clicks shut?
The walls are high, the cage is electric, and the guards, they are invisible.
But here is the secret the deep state is terrified for you to discover. Their entire empire is built on your participation. They need your debt. They need your distraction. They need your consent to be governed by their lies. So, how do you exit a matrix that has no physical doors? You start by declaring your own financial independence. If the dollar is a debt engine designed to drain your life force, you must move your energy into assets they cannot print: gold, silver, and decentralized protocols like Bitcoin, the only life rafts in a sea of fiat paper. These aren't just investments. They are votes for a world where math is the master, not a group of men on Jekyll Island. Next, you decouple your mind. Stop drinking the sedative of mainstream media. If they are all owned by the same 3 investment firms, why are you still listening to them? Seek out independent voices. Use encrypted tools. Protect your data as if it were the last piece of land you own. The lesson is this: freedom is not something that is given to you by a government. Freedom is something you take back by becoming self-reliant. If you do not control your money, your food, and your information, you are not a citizen. You are a captive. The transition has begun. Millions are waking up, rubbing the sleep from their eyes, and realizing that the invisible drivers of this world are no longer in the shadows. They are us. We are the ones who decide where this journey goes next. This isn't just a video. It is a signal in the dark, a reminder that you were born to be free, not to be a line item on a central bank's ledger. The game is rigged, but now you know the rules. And once you know the rules, you can stop playing their game and start building your own. Welcome to the invisible driver, where there are truths that society doesn't want you to know.